there's two things here, right? There's the person that's sharing a message, and not just a message, right, but sharing a conviction and understanding about life and who I am and what this world is about and what's beyond it and who's beyond it. And
Mm,
someone's carrying that in their heart, and you open your heart to that, and a seed is planted, and it starts to grow, or there's a transmission, not just a transmission of just uh, academic knowledge, but a transmission of understanding.
mm,
What am I meant for? What am I meant to do? And so that is what happened. That's our tradition speaks a lot about that. Of course, there's that very famous verse spoken by Sri Chaitanya, Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij, right? That this is so important, right? That we're wandering for many, many lifetimes, through many different planets and, bouncing back and forth throughout the universe. And but a fortunate soul, after wandering for we don't know how many lifetimes, may connect with a true guru, you know,
mm.
with someone that is carrying and demonstrating and living and embodying divya jnana, knowledge of what's beyond all of this. And that if that person has that potency and they're vibrating in that way, and then you open your heart up to that vibration through their words, through their example, that the conviction and the understanding that they have in their heart may be ignited in your heart. And we call
Mm.
that initiation. That's actually like that's really the initiation, right? That may be formalized in a ceremony, but the birth of what takes place in the heart there, that's the transmission of bhakti from one to the other.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom and the Sages, a daily spiritual podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York, Kaustubha. It's June 10th, 2025. This is episode 1623. Welcome to the show. It's Tuesday. We made it back, Kaustubha. We weren't going to make it back. We were going to sleep in. We're going to play it cool. We were going to blow off our Wisdom of the Sages meeting. But
Hold it. Yeah, what?
you didn't know that?
No, I didn't know
I'm on the
that.
blow off the
In
meeting.
other words, you were
I
going to
was on the
stay
blow
in.
off the. I was going to stay in New York City. That's why I'm exhausted today. We
But
went
why
to
would you have to do that? Maybe you should have. You could have just rested. You could have done the show from the city.
no. I'm hosting like 11 people at my house right
Oh,
now.
the Latra boys.
The Alacho boys, their parents, Bunky,
Nice.
hosting Bunky. Anyway,
Bunky's fine there. He doesn't. He doesn't. Not everything depends on you, Raghunath.
I know. Well, we took a day off. We went to see my mom.
Okay. How's she doing?
You know what? She's doing great.
See?
She's a shining bright light. It's amazing. It's like I thought she was going to be. I think she's a little lonely, and I just wanted to visit her because she expressed that she was a little lonely.
Oh, she said that to you.
Yeah, she said she's a little lonely because my
She's
sister
not
lives in
lonely
New
when
York.
you're there, so that's why she seemed great. But then once you left, maybe she's back down again. Maybe you got to bring her up to Super Soul Farm.
You know what? I think I'm going to try to bring her to Rath Yatra. It might be a
And
little too much, but if we get a
Lalita.
chair for her, I'm thinking if I get a chair for her, we can put her
Yeah.
as the what is it called? The
Chairperson.
matriarch of Lord Jagannath or of the Jagannath Rath Yatra.
I think you
We
got
can-
to get her there, and you got to bring her friend, Lalita.
We're going to get into this again. We're gonna
Bring
get into this
her.
about stealing an elderly woman from an old age home.
Get the permissions.
But I tell you, every time I'm with mom, you get so many realizations. You know what I do? I've done every time I'm with her now. I interview her to really just pick her brain about what life was like for her growing up. And you know what? Me and Mara have come to the conclusion.
It was hell back then. It was better back then.
It was like they just did what their duties was. They just didn't
They're dutiful
complain about
people.
stuff.
Right.
They just didn't complain about stuff.
Right.
They just did it. And we're so caught up in trying to like make sure.
Too many
What did you say in
choices.
the car yesterday? We were just so self-indulgent
Indulgent.
with our own triggers, issues,
Yeah, like in the name of trying to like in the name of self-betterment, I think.
or even spirituality.
Yeah, I think it's easy like today to go down a rabbit hole of kind of like almost self-indulgent. These are my trigger points, these are my traumas, these are my tendencies, these are my
Right.
attachment theory patterns.
Everybody
You really get
revolve
wrapped up in
around
it.
me.
Yeah, you sort of get wrapped up in it of like, oh, these are my childhood wounds and my inner child really needs this. And it's like, you
Move
think
on.
back just one generation or two generations ago, and it's like they didn't have that
It's like
luxury.
it was more like, okay, let's get food.
Yeah, like
Let's get
let's
some food
like
today.
we need
What do you say?
yeah, like we can't have a dog because
Well, she said something really funny while you went to the bathroom. She was just like, there was a family downstairs. They were getting hit by poverty. I was like, Mom, you had 6 girls, 5 sisters living in a 1-bedroom apartment. Your mother was unemployed and your father like was shoveling snow. You were hit by poverty. It was during the Great Depression. They pulled your older sister out of school to work to make money, that she wasn't allowed to get married because they were so broke. You were hit by poverty. What are you talking about? Well, I don't know. We never felt like we had. I was like, what was your Christmas like?
I got an orange.
She got an orange. She got an orange.
It might have been a really rare thing to get an orange.
Now I understand. Yeah, I guess it was. It was like it's the equivalent of like getting some acai nowadays. Not even acai in 1988. Getting an orange. Whoa, it's orange. It's like a tropical fruit.
Yeah.
Anyway, but you get a lot of realizations, and then you realize just like, okay, you're old. All your friends are dead. This is just like this is it. And you know what's really good? You get to really steer the conversation, and you get to draw things out of her, and you get to hold people's memories. Because I started asking her like what her parents were like, what was family like, and she's like, well, I never asked these questions. I go, well, this is why I'm asking you these questions, because we can remember these things forever. Anyway,
Okay, Raghu.
just
I'm glad you went down.
I'm glad I did too.
Let's focus.
I'm focused.
Are you?
I was going to ask you to focus.
I'm focused. Let's go, Mara.
All right,
what are
Miss
the
Mara,
announcements?
what's going on with you?
I don't have any announcements today.
Whoa, hold it. Wait. That's the first time that ever happened. Mara's a little.
We need to redo our announcements. That's why. I'm
Oh,
sick of
yeah,
our
we do.
same old announcements.
Me too. Me too.
So,
Okay.
should we dive into the nugget?
Yeah, let's dive into a nugget time. This is a nugget from your favorite of mine, Rumi.
Rumi.
If I put a picture of myself doing Warrior 2 and a quote from Rumi, I might become a guru.
All right. Rumi writes, words are a pretext.
No words.
It is the inner bond that draws one person to another, not words.
Words. They're
Words.
bad. Is this telling us words are not good, or is it telling us something more than that? Or there's something different than that?
Let me think.
Focus.
Well, we live it. Our whole thing is that words are special. Sounds are special. I understand what he means, but like, for example, we're doing the words of the Bhagavatam.
okay.
We're not saying it's just about a connection or a vibe or I saw her across the room or something nebulous or vague. No, the words of the Bhagavatam, the Gita, those aren't ordinary words. Our faith, our belief system is that they are none different than Krishna. They are eternal. They're truth. That's why we quote them. That's why we hear them. But here's the thing. Sometimes you can hear the same sacred words or even the same basic message. God is within you. You're not the body. Devotion is the path. You can, you hear that 100 times from different people, some books, some lectures, some podcasts or whatever. It just doesn't always land. And it doesn't always move your heart and you don't necessarily receive it. And then, boom, like one day you hear it from somebody who really lives it. And maybe that's the difference.
Mhm.
Someone whose heart is lit up with realization, and all of a sudden it's like something breaks open inside you. It's not just like I heard it and I got it. I think that's what Rumi's talking about. I think it's not just words, it's the transmission of the words. It's how it lands with you. It's that inner bond, that heart-to-heart connection when one heart is open and the other heart is full. And then there's a divine spark that jumps from one to another. That's the transmission. That's something sacred. That you can't manufacture. That's something you can't fake. And when that does happen, then that's sort of unforgettable. And I think you have that in your own life when someone it landed to you and you first heard your teacher speak. And maybe you heard it in a book or maybe you heard it from a teacher, but you were ripe and the receiver was ready to give. And I say Kaustubha, it's also something, you got to live to really transmit, because it's something in the character of the person giving that you say, oh, he's not just talking. He's not just lecturing me. This isn't just a quote. This is a person sort of like walking his talk. If I want to be the guy, what's my new quote? Oh man, where's my new quote?
Got a new quote?
I got a new quote that I like.
There it is.
Here's my new quote. Yeah. How can I be the guy that's teaching people how to be the guy if I'm not the guy?
Okay.
How could I be the guy that's teaching people how to be the guy if I'm not the guy?
Okay.
Stole that from Mike Stone. It's one of those 12-step recovery quotes. But it's important because if I'm going to teach people, if I want something to transmit to somebody else, I gotta walk that. I can't just be talking that. And then all it becomes magical. You can read this quote very easily and say, yeah, I know. Something magic when she lit up the room. I don't think that's what Rumi's talking about. Like my lust was triggered and then there was some inner bond and she looked at me and I looked at her and I knew that she was the one. You know what I mean?
I don't think he was speaking in a romantic context at all.
Yeah, people can read it that way. Words are pretext. It's the inner bond that draws one person to another, not words. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No,
What do you think?
I appreciate what you said, especially what you mentioned something about one heart being full and one heart being open.
Mm-hmm.
This is really important. Our thing is it's not just learning, right? It's not just that we're hearing a message and you learn it and then you've learned it, you got that all figured out in the head, and now everything changes. As you were saying, you can hear the same message from many different sources and it never lands, right? And I shared that story once when I was speaking about how when I was like 19 or 20, no, 20 years old, 19, 20, I was reading Prabhupada's books, and they were resonating with me. And I even attended some different programs, some different classes,
Yeah.
And then one day, somehow I got led into the apartment of my friend and for some program. And there was just a few of us there, and the person that would become my guru walked in the door and sat down and began to speak with us. And there was something that happened that when that was done, and I was standing out on the sidewalk of Clinton Street, at downtown, and I said, okay, now my life changes. Now everything's different. There was a conviction that he had in his heart that perhaps was either deeper and or resonated with my heart in a way, like two tuning forks. You hit one tuning fork and it resonates, and then another tuning fork starts to vibrate. I don't know, with tuning forks, I know they have different notes, right?
Yeah.
Like if you hit one
Yeah.
tuning fork and the other tuning fork is a different note, does it not vibrate? Dude, I don't know. But in any case, it may be that our heart opens to a person in a way that it doesn't open to another. There's two things here, right? There's the person that's sharing a message, and not just a message, right? But sharing a conviction, an understanding. about life and who I am and what this world is about and what's beyond it and who's beyond it. And someone's carrying that in their heart, and you open your heart to that, and a seed is planted, and it starts to grow, or there's a transmission, not just a transmission of just academic knowledge, but a transmission of understanding. What am I meant for? What am I meant to do? And so that is what happened. That's our tradition speaks a lot about that. Of course, there's that very famous verse spoken by Sri Chaitanya, Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij, right? That this is so important, right? That we're wandering for many, many lifetimes, through many different planets and, bouncing back and forth throughout the universe. And, but a fortunate soul, after wandering for we don't know how many lifetimes, may connect with a true guru, with someone that is carrying and demonstrating and living and embodying divya jnana, knowledge of what's beyond all of this. And that if that person has that potency and they're vibrating in that way, and then you open your heart up to that vibration through their words, through their example, that the conviction and the understanding that they have in their heart may be ignited in your heart. And we call that initiation. That's actually that's really the initiation, right? That may be formalized in a ceremony, but the birth of what takes place in the heart there, that's the transmission of bhakti from one to the other. Prabhupada wrote a beautiful commentary to that verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, 19:151. But the last paragraph of it, he quotes this verse. Well, I'll read a little bit more than the last paragraph. He says, if one is fortunate, they become intimately related with this movement, the Krishna movement, the Bhakti movement. Then by the grace of Krishna, one's life becomes successful. Everyone has dormant Krishna Bhakti, love for Krishna. And in the association of good devotees, that love is revealed. As stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema, Sadhya Kabunaya, Shravanadi, Shuddha Chitta Karye Udaya. Dormant bhakti to Krishna is within everyone. Simply by associating with devotees, hearing their good instructions, and chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, dormant love for Krishna is awakened. In this way, one acquires the seed of devotional service, the seed of bhakti. Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Bija. Right? It vibrates from one. It's dormant in us. But when someone is vibrating, when it's alive in someone, when it's not sitting dormant in someone else, then it can transfer from their heart into your heart, and that seed, grows into to the creeper and into the plant, giving the fruits of bhakti eventually. Special thing.
Yeah, I like it. I like how you explained it.
Special thing.
All right.
All right. You ready?
All right, let's take it. That was good. That was a good one.
Well, it's going to connect. We're going to see here.
Alrighty. It's Srimad Bhagavatam time. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayat. Before we start the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord Narayan. Unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayeshva vadreshu nicham bhagavat sevaya bhagavati uttama shloki. Ishtaki, by regular attending classes of Bhagavatam and rendering service to the devotee, all this from the and loving service to the Supreme who is.
Oh, Raghunath's freezing up and lagging. You there, Raghu? Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena
torch
Tasmai
light of
Shri
knowledge.
Gurave Namaha. Oh, you were lagging big
What
time,
happened?
brother.
I lagged?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It's
Reading
not
from
your-
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, chapter 2, text 17.
Okay, what's going on here? Do you remember?
Yeah, this is when kids are being born. When I say kids, I mean the personality of Godhead, feminine expansion of the personality of Godhead, and the personality of Godhead's older brother.
Part 2.
Yeah, part 2.
So Balaram has taken birth, but he's been transferred from the womb of Devakī into the womb of Rohini.
And Rohini's Vasudev's other wife, and she's living with Yashoda.
And
Now,
the
Yashoda
cow
had a
is
baby
named
girl. She is the feminine, energetic source of the universe and is about to take birth in this universe. And she's arranging everything because she is Yogamaya. She's the director of all these spiritual affairs and directives. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is giving her these directives, and she bows and says, okay, I'll make all arrangements. And so she comes in the form of Durga, coming out of the... She gets born of Devakī. Kamsa's going to try to kill her, right? We didn't get
born
there.
of Yashoda, and then brought to Devakī.
Yeah. I'm sorry. She was born of Yashoda, and then she gets switched with Krishna in the womb. And then we're going to read this.
Not in the womb.
Not in the womb. Outside the womb. It was a virgin birth. There was no womb.
Sorry.
There was no womb. It was not messy. There was no.
Well, no. Like Yashoda gave birth, right?
I don't know. I never heard.
Yeah, and then she woke up. She fell asleep and she woke up, but
You're saying it was a birth?
Well, as far as I understand, Yashoda's walking around pregnant, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but it's worth looking at.
Yeah, I think they were pregnant, but I don't know if they. Anyway.
And so then,
I'm not going to get into whether something was a vaginal birth or not today. It's too early.
well, no, you are. It's going to go there.
The fact that I just said it just means I went there.
But in any case, so Krishna Shakti, female Shakti, is born to Yashoda, and now we're going to hear about the birth of.
It was an immaculate conception, if I understand.
We're going to read about that right now. And so meanwhile, Krishna is going to be born, and this is a very unique immaculate conception that we're about to read of how Krishna appears in Vasudeva and is transferred to Devakī. Okay. I think we're starting here with text 17, right? Is that
This
right?
is right, getting down to my mother's story about how she met Jesus when I was born.
She denied that when we interviewed her live on the show, right?
No, she didn't deny it. She just didn't
totally
remember
denied it.
I grew up.
She
with
didn't
that. I
remember
grew up
it.
with that story. I grew up with that story. It's not. I didn't fabricate.
Okay,
Jesus.
she saw Jesus, but she forgot. Okay.
She forgot. She's 99. Allow her to forget a few things.
That one you remember, though.
How can I not remember? That was like the story when I was growing up.
Okay.
You would forget that?
I think maybe
I'm still
you
in my
created
right
it.
mind. She forgets everything.
I think maybe you created that one in your head.
She's telling me stories she told me 4 minutes ago.
Okay. She remembers she got an orange for
She remembers
Christmas. She can't remember she met Jesus when she gave birth to you decades later.
Remember she got an orange. You know, by the way, it's funny. Ramah Devi on Zoom said, I gave my nephews and nieces oranges on Christmas one day in their stockings, and it did not go over well.
She's like, it's from Florida.
Not interested.
My brothers and I used to get fruit in our stockings also, and it wasn't like exotic fruit or special fruit. It was like the fruit out of the fruit bowl that would be put in our stocking
Really?
and
Yeah,
bulk
that's-
it out.
It's kind of like a last minute thing.
Yeah.
It's one of those things of like, I'm going to give an apple on Halloween. That never went over well.
My brother Hamilton had the biggest stocking, so he would get like
Tons.
3 grapefruits in there. It was like,
The grapefruit was filler.
nobody likes grapefruit.
No child likes grapefruit.
All right, let's get into this, Raghunath. Come on.
I was into it.
No, you were talking about grapefruit.
Well, you diverted it by not just validating that my mom saw Jesus.
Okay. See, you always.
Well, because I just said, because like my mom said Jesus, let's keep going. And you're like, well, your mom never saw Jesus.
I squirreled off about the stockings.
All right, Raghunath. Your mom saw Jesus. Let's go.
While carrying the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead within the core of his heart, Vasudeva bore the Lord's transcendently illuminating effulgence.
Okay, why don't we go
Thus-
to text 16 because we got to. That's
All
going
right,
to tie into.
Rewind.
Otherwise,
We got to rewind this a little
Yeah,
bit,
rewind.
Mara. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the super soul of all living entities and who vanquishes all the fear of his devotees, entered the mind of Vasudeva in full opulence. Okay, this is the pregnancy right here. The
Yeah.
Supreme Personality
So-
of
so-
Godhead.
yeah.
How did Devakī get born? The
Not
personality
Devakī,
of Godhead.
Krishna.
Right. The personality of Godhead
Yeah.
who enters the mind of Vasudeva.
Right.
First, he, quote, inseminates Vasudeva. He enters into Vasudeva. Vasudeva lights up. While
Yeah.
carrying the form of the Supreme Personality Godhead within the core of his heart, Vasudeva bore the Lord's transcendently illuminating effulgence. So he started glowing.
Yeah.
Imagine that if your father all of a sudden just like lights up.
Yeah.
That's what's happening right now.
Well, you're not born yet, so you don't get a chance to see it. But
Well, imagine if he lights up for your older brother being born,
or your younger brother.
or your younger brother, right?
Okay.
He was therefore very difficult to. So he was therefore Vasudeva became very difficult to see because he was so bright. That's how bright. I'm not just talking like he had a big grin on his face. It was difficult to see. He was so bright.
Yeah.
You couldn't, or even approach him through sensory perception. He was that bright.
Okay.
Indeed, he was unapproachable and unperceivable, even for such formidable men as Kamsa. And not only Kamsa, but all living entities. I wonder what it means by that. Like,
Well, there's no one superior to him. There's no one can compete.
I'm just saying his light was so bright that people couldn't approach. What does that mean? Anyway.
So, in this verse, it mentions Sa, he, Vasudeva, Bibrat carried Paurusham, pertaining to the supreme person, Dhamma. And he translated word for word as the spiritual effulgence, the Dhamma. But Prabhupada writes about that in the commentary. Why don't you read that first paragraph, or read some?
17?
Yeah.
Okay. The word Dhamma is significant. Dhamma refers to the place where the personality of Godhead resides.
Like we say, Brindavan, Dhamma, Mayapur, Dhamma, right? That's the term they use.
In the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam 111, it's the first verse, it is said, Dana Svena Sada Nirastra Kuhakang Satyam Param Dhimahi.
Right.
In the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no influence of material energy. Damna Svena Sada Nirastra Kuhakam. Any place where the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present by his name, form, qualities, or paraphernalia immediately becomes a dham, right? We're going to go see Lord Jagannath. Washington Square Park becomes a dham. Washington Square Park was a graveyard. Did you know that?
Yeah, back in the day, that's right.
Back in the day, it was like a graveyard. Now it's going to become a dham. Why? Because of the paraphernalia of the Lord's holy name, the deity of the Lord, the prasad of the Lord. It's all going to be there. And you're going to be able to feel it. You're going to be actually almost like essentially feel a difference by entering that place. For example, we speak of Vrindavan Dham, Dwarka Dham, Mathura Dham, because in these places, the name, fame, qualities, and paraphernalia of the Supreme Godhead are always present. Similarly, if one is empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to do something, the core of his heart becomes a dham. And thus he becomes so extraordinarily powerful that not only his enemies, but also people in general are astonished to observe his activities because he is unapproachable. His enemies are simply struck with wonder, as explained here by the words Durasado Tidur Darshaha.
Okay, so this is an interesting idea. It's saying that God is present in many ways. It's trying to get us to think a little bit more deeply, get a little bit off the superficial level. When we think about God, when we think about salvation, when we think about heaven, like in a Christian context, right? We're saying Dham, the place of God. You could say it like that if you wanted to, right? And it's saying that wherever God is, that place is the Dham. God doesn't exist outside the holy place. He's always existing within holy space, in a sense. We may not even quite be able to perceive him or perceive the space, but wherever he is, that space becomes a spiritually energized vortex, or zone, and so
Yeah.
we're
Like they have a work zone. Once you drive on the highway and there's a work zone, everything changes.
everything
You got to go
changes.
slower. You got to be a little careful. You start to notice things.
People
Things,
wearing helmets, cones, orange
the
things.
outfits are different.
Yeah.
There's
So-
machinery. Speeding
That's
tickets are
right.
doubled.
Okay.
Points
So-
on your license. Go.
All right. So the idea, when we get to bhakti, it's not so much about like, certainly there's the idea that we can transcend the material realm and in a sense re-enter the spiritual realm and live in that realm in a similar way that a Christian may conceive of going to heaven.
Yep.
But really there's a more fundamental understanding underneath it, right? Is that where there's consciousness of God, there is God. And when you are in contact with that, wherever you are at is heaven in a sense. It really doesn't matter. And so here saying God is present by his name, form, qualities, paraphernalia. Wherever that exists becomes a dham. You can make your home a holy zone. You can make your neighborhood a holy zone. You take the Govardhan Eco Village, right?
Yeah.
There's a place that, it seemed just kind of like a barren, dry area of Maharashtra.
It was.
Yeah. And by the desire and the consciousness of, one devotee who's can, again, like we were talking about earlier, from his heart, he transferred to the hearts of other devotees. Let's create a dham here. Let's create a holy place. And then that's vibrating now amongst more people. And they take a material place that just seems like a dry place and it becomes an opulent, lush, beautiful place where you can't step in there and not remember Krishna. Before you could step in there and be like, why am I in this dry, arid place? And now you step in there and you cannot help but feel your consciousness go towards Krishna and feel like you're walking in the spiritual world. So wherever that remembrance of Krishna, that consciousness of Krishna is, wherever that God consciousness is, becomes a dham. And so it was in the most profound way. It was there in Vasudeva, right? It entered into him and he's glowing. And now he's going to transfer it one heart to another, heart to heart transmission.
I wonder if it was like that for my mom when Jesus appeared.
It may have been, Raghunath. It very
You know
well
what I
may
mean?
have been.
She probably just like lit up
It
the
may have been
room.
so powerful that she forgot it. She just,
You're not gonna give me anything for this, are you?
No, I gave it to you. I gave you an explanation of why she forgot it.
She forgot
'Cause it was
after she
just-
was 99. She
it was
never
so
forgot since I was a
profound.
teenager. She told me my whole life. She forgot. People are allowed to forget things in their 90s, Kaustubha.
Raghunath, I'm supporting.
All I'm saying is Jesus,
Was
it's a dham. Jesus shows up at your bedside. Your bedroom is a dham.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying.
I appreciate that point, Raghunath.
Thank you. I like how someone, Madan Gopal, put a picture of Jesus and Krishna sitting side by side.
Maybe Krishna was
on
there
the
at your
message
birth
board.
too, Raghunath.
Maybe it was Krishna and she mistook him for.
Could've
Yeah,
been.
Jesus had an interesting little cowherd, a little
He was blue.
cowherd stick and a feather in his hair. Some man with long hair came in.
All right. It may have been like a sage, like Vyasadeva. The beard may have thrown her off and everything.
Or
Maybe
it could have been
was
just some
Vyasa.
hippie. It could have just been some.
Maybe it was a
who's working
hippie
for the
wandered in
hospital.
there. That could have been it.
Are you Jesus? No, I'm an intern here. Okay, I can't hear very well.
Okay, now the next verse, 18, right?
Mm.
Is it 18? Yeah.
Thereafter, accompanied by plenary expansions, the fully opulent Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is all auspicious for the entire universe, was transferred from the mind of Vasudeva to the mind of Devakī.
All right.
Transferred to the mind.
Yeah.
Mm.
So it was.
Interesting. So his effulgence is leaving him and entering into Devakī.
Yeah.
Having thus been initiated by Vasudeva,
Interesting.
became beautiful by carrying Lord Krishna, the original consciousness for everyone, the cause of all causes, within the core of her heart, just as the East becomes beautiful by carrying the rising moon.
No, this is a really significant stuff here, right? Krishna was transferred from one person to another, right?
Mm.
Prabhupada is translating this by saying that she was initiated, right? He's saying initiation. Within our tradition, when we use the word initiation or diksha, generally, on the most superficial level, we're saying, okay, a ceremony is done just like in any religion has its rites, whether it's baptism or confirmation or
Yeah.
I don't know if they would consider a bar mitzvah, but like there's kind of like an acceptance into the religion,
Sure.
right? And so in one sense we could say initiation is that, but no, it's something far more significant than that. It's Krishna being transmitted from the mind and heart of one soul to the mind and heart of another soul. And so I find it very interesting that Prabhupada, in this most literal sense of Krishna being in Vasudeva and being transferred into Devakī, it is kind of, it naturally plays into the analogy that Prabhupada also uses in his explanations of transmission of spiritual knowledge when he says, if a man is potent and a woman is fertile, then through their union, there's something takes birth, right?
Yep.
And in a similar way, if one spiritual person, a teacher, a guru, is potent in spiritual knowledge, potent in spiritual, I say knowledge, but we might understand that word knowledge superficially. But by the word knowledge, divya jnana, transcendental knowledge, it means more than just information. It means that the full understanding and embodiment and conviction in that knowledge, that becomes transferred from one being to the next, right? Through their words, through their example, maybe even just through their presence, in a sense, is transferred from one person to another. He's calling that's initiation, that's diksha. And then this example is used of the moon, just as the east becomes beautiful by carrying the rising moon. Right? He said, Lord Krishna, the original consciousness for everyone. Amazing, right? The original consciousness for everyone. Our consciousness is he enters the heart of every living being, grants consciousness. The cause of all causes within the core of her heart, just as the east becomes beautiful by carrying the rising moon, right? The moon arises, in the east. And the moon gives light. The moon isn't as important to us nowadays as it was to people before there was electricity, right? But if you go out at night, the stars aren't going to do too much for you in terms of lighting the place up. But a full moon, you can get around. It gives light, and it's very beautiful and very satisfying. But what is the moon? It's reflecting the light of the sun. So even though the sun's not there, the sun's light is now present in the form of the moon. And so just like the light of Krishna consciousness is present in one person, and then in a sense it reflects in another, becomes present in another, and arises in another place. Even when that original person isn't there, the light is there in the form of the next person. But maybe you can read the commentary to this one too. I think it's real significant stuff.
Okay, here's the commentary of 18. As indicated here by the word manashtaha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead was transferred from the core of Vasudeva's mind, or heart, to the core of the heart of Devakī. We should know carefully that the Lord was transferred to Devakī not by the ordinary way for a human being, but by diksha, initiation. Thus, the importance of initiation is mentioned here. Unless one is initiated by the right person, who always carries within his heart the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot acquire the power to carry the Supreme Personality of Godhead within the core of one's own heart.
Let's pause here for a second. We might get introduced to Bhakti and the society of Bhakti yogis and understand initiation and think of initiation as a process whereby I'm accepted into a community, or I formalize my acceptance of a particular faith. We also might think, oh, now I have my own personal guru who I can go forward and, I kind of have like a mentor or even like a counselor. But that's not how it's being portrayed here by Prabhupada. he's portraying it specifically as Krishna being alive in one person and being transformed and becoming alive in another person. Right? That's how he's defining it. I'm not saying that anything said before it can't be part of it, isn't necessarily part of it. It is a formal acceptance of a particular faith, etc. But let's really try to understand the essence of it. Krishna is alive in one person, meaning the faith and the understanding and the consciousness of Krishna is alive in one person. And that consciousness awakens in another person, like the sun's light is transferred to the moon.
Mm.
That's what we're talking about. And I think if we think of it that way, our relationship with our guru becomes so much more rightly attuned. We know what is the nature of this what am I looking for in them, and how am I meant to understand this relationship and this connection. It's Krishna consciousness being alive in one person, and then opening up the heart to become receptive to that, so that Krishna consciousness becomes alive in my own mind and own heart. Please continue,
Raghu. Next verse, where you want to keep
Look
going
at
with
the
this?
commentary.
Okay. The word achutasham is being used by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word achutasham is used because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Sad Aishvarya Purna, full in the opulences of wealth, strength, fame, knowledge, beauty, and renunciation. Right? He's full in those things. We have a little bit of those. We've got a little wealth, got a little bit of strength, got a little bit of fame, got a little bit of knowledge, very little, got a little beauty. I'm slightly beautiful, not much, but a little bit. and all these opulences I have, they're fading fast, and a little bit of renunciation. The Supreme Godhead, though, is never separated from his personal opulences, as stated in the Brahma Samhita. Ramadi Mutishu Kala Niyamaena Tishtan. The Lord is always situated with all his plenary expansions, such as Rama, Nishringa, Varaha. Therefore, the word Achutam Sham is specifically used here, signifying that the Lord is always present with his plenary expansions and opulences. There is no need to think of the Lord. There is no need to think of the Lord artificially, as yogis do. Dhyana vashtita tad gatena manasa pashyanti yam yogina. Yogis meditate on the Supreme Person within the mind. For a devotee, however, the Lord is present, and his presence need only be awakened through initiation by a bona fide spiritual master. The Lord did not live within.
But I'm trying to understand what Prabhupada is saying here, and if I think what he's saying is that for a yogi, meaning not a bhakti yogi, but like an ashtanga yogi, their idea is they want to connect with God, but it's something like, well, I'm not normally there 24 hours a day, but I go into meditation and I connect with God through meditation.
Yeah.
And he's saying
That's
that
how I read it.
Yeah, and then, but for a bhakti yogi, it's not that I need to enter into a state of trance to experience God's presence, but God's presence is always alive in me as I move throughout the day at any point in my existence, always,
for a devotee,
always present.
However, the Lord is present, and his presence need only be awakened through initiation by a bona fide spiritual master. So we're
Yeah, and again,
hearing
that's
all
not a
this
ceremony,
information.
right? That's
Yeah.
a transferal, a
It's
transmission.
a transferal.
Yeah.
Hey, it could happen in a podcast when you were hearing this thing, and we get a gong go off, like, oh, this is what I meant to. This is the direction of my life should go to. The Lord did not live within the
Need to
womb.
live.
I'm sorry. The Lord did not need to live within the womb of Devakī, for his presence within the core of her heart was sufficient to carry him. One is forbidden to think that Krishna was begotten by Vasudeva within the womb of Devakī, and that she carried a child within her womb.
Okay.
It was a wombless child.
Yes, wombless birth.
When Vasudeva was sustaining the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart, he appeared just like the glowing sun, whose shining rays are always unbearable and scourging to the common man. The form of the Lord situated in pure unalloyed heart of Vasudeva is not different from the original form of Krishna. The appearance of the form of Krishna anywhere, and specifically within the heart, is called dham. Dham refers not only to Krishna's form, but to his name, his form, his quality, his paraphernalia. Everything becomes manifest simultaneously.
So this is such a fascinating commentary. These are some of the towards the end of the last commentaries that we're going to get from Srila Prabhupada, right? He's only got about this was probably in 1977 that he's translating this, and he's only going to go up to chapter 13 of 10th canto. We're in chapter 2 right now.
Wow. Yeah, he leaves his body while translating this.
Yeah. And here the idea, he's saying, he's talking about initiation in a very interesting way, and he's talking about one's heart becoming a dham, right? Like I'm assuming he's in Vrindavan as he's maybe not, but he's kind of saying, like your heart can become Vrindavan when you associate with someone whose heart is Vrindavan, right? When your heart is the place where Krishna lives and his pastimes are alive, it can be transferred from that heart to the heart of another, and then that person's heart can become Vrindavan, the place where Krishna's pastimes are alive.
Thus, the eternal. Okay, you want to keep going with this? You want to just
Please, yeah.
verse? Next verse or this?
No, please continue with this.
Thus, the eternal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with full potencies, was transferred from the mind of Vasudeva to the mind of Devakī, exactly as the setting sun's rays are transferred to the full moon rising in the east. Krishna, the Supreme Personality.
It's interesting, right? When the sun sets, it's still as effulgent as ever.
Oftentimes, it becomes more beautiful.
But I'm saying even when it's fully set and we don't see it anymore and everything becomes dark.
Oh.
But when we look at the moon, we think, oh, that's the moon, it's not the sun, but it's really the sun's light. So the sun's light staying with us even when it's not there.
Good one.
Yeah.
Good one. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, entered the body of Devakī from the body of Vasudeva. He was beyond the conditions of an ordinary living entity. When Krishna is there, it is understood that all his plenary expansions such as Narayan, and incarnations like Lord Nrsimha and Varaha are with him. And they are not subject to the conditions of material existence. In this way, Devakī became the residence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is one without a second and the cause of all creation. Devakī became the residence of the Absolute Truth, but because she was within the house of Kamsa, she looked just like a suppressed fire or like misused education. Interesting analogy.
Yeah.
All right. When fire is covered by the walls of a pot or it's kept in a jug, the illuminating rays of the fire cannot be very much appreciated. Similarly, misused knowledge, which does not benefit the people in general, is not very much appreciated, right?
Yeah.
Suppose you're really good at math, but you use it to run a drug cartel.
Okay.
So Devakī was kept within the prison walls of Kamsa's palace, and no one could see her transcendental beauty, which resulted from her conceiving the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
She's all lit up now. And the last, this is nice, this last short paragraph.
Commenting upon this verse, Sri Veera Raghava Acharya writes, Vasudeva Devakī Jatarayor Hridayor Bhagavata Sambandha. The Supreme Lord's entrance into the womb of Devakī from the heart of Vasudeva was a heart-to-heart relationship.
Heart to heart. That's a big phrase right there, right? Heart to heart. When we think of bhakti, when we think of initiation, when we think of waking up, not just getting, there are plenty of people with the whole Bhagavad Gita in their head. There's scholars that have studied Srimad Bhagavatam that can describe the whole 10th canto and the Rasa Lila in great detail, but there has yet to be a heart-to-heart. There may be a brain-to-brain transmission or a book-to-brain transmission, but is there a heart-to-heart transmission? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to situate the heart to become open to receiving this. And that means being careful in every way that we're not making our heart harder in a way or more closed in any way. right? And that's where like a lot of the things that we talk about every day, you know, having the right sentiments in the hearts, the right sentiments towards Krishna, the right sentiments towards Krishna's devotees, and the right sentiments towards every living being. That's all important for the heart to be open to receiving this vibration, this light, this transmission. You know, there's that later in the 11th canto, there's this verse that describes bhakti yogis on 3 different levels. And the first level is like, it's hardly even really a bhakti yogi, but it's probably the most common level, right? It's the beginner's level. What is it? Oh man, that's why I just slipped my mind right now. Archana me bahariye, pujam ye shradhayate, satad bhakteshu chanyeshu sabhakta prakrita smritaha. That when one sees God in the temple, right? Oh, you know, and bows down, you know, worships God there. I have this connection with God in the temple, but they don't have a similar kind of appreciation for the devotees. They don't see God in the devotees. They only see God on that altar where I see that external form. I can accept that, I'll bow down. But I don't see God lit up in the hearts of others, right? That's what we're saying, that Krishna is there in the form of consciousness. Consciousness of him is him. And that's alive in the hearts of the devotees. I bow down in the temple to that form of Krishna on the altar in the temple, but I have no appreciation or perception that God is alive in the heart of the devotees. And then it says nata bhakteshu, they not in the devotees, nachanyeshu, or in people in general, right? I don't see God in the hearts of every living being. Then it's saying
This is like fundamentalism.
That's right. It's that
maybe
kind
the
of
very
shallow,
definition of
fundamentalism, or just shallow religious thinking. That person is called sabhakta prakrita smritaha, a materialistic devotee. They're only seeing matter. They can't see spirit. They have no perception of spirit. They're like a beginner or the neophyte. It's hardly a devotee. And in our practice, we got to be really careful to get off that platform, be real attentive to get off that platform of bhakti and try to get ourselves onto the next stage of bhakti where we begin to really respect others.
Yeah.
All right, Raghu, I think we're out of time.
Begins with us, Kaustubha.
Oh.
Begins
What is it? Let there be peace on earth.
And let it begin with you.
Okay. You too.
Let it begin with me.
And let it begin with Mara.
Ready for some takeaways?
Whenever you write on the message board, anyone got any takeaways today? I'm always like, oh, you got nothing, huh?
I can take
No,
away.
she's sharing the
You're asking
responsibility.
for more.
Sometimes I like to crowdsource.
It's a community thing.
Crowdsource. Okay, I like that.
Okay. Hear it from someone who lives it.
Okay.
Learn it, live it, give it.
It's not just the words, it's the heart-to-heart connection.
From heart to heart, Raghunath. Your heart, my heart, back and forth.
When I see you, I'm going to chest bump you, but I'm going to stay there. I'm not going to bump you. I'm just going to hold you there.
Smush. Heart to heart transmission.
Right
you're
in front
walking
of Lord
around.
Jagannath. He's
Getting
like,
Well, you know, when devotees embrace, you know, I've heard this before and I try to practice it, but you know, because devotees are embracing all the time, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes you go and you put your head on your left-hand side, right?
On
towards
someone. Oh.
But really, if you go the other way, you're more heart to heart. Boom, like that, right? Just bring two hearts
You think
together.
that's different? You think that's different?
What do you mean?
You think that feels different by doing it that way?
I think it's a nice sentiment. It
Okay.
cultivates a nice sentiment.
Transmission of bhakti is the true initiation.
There you go.
Where there's God consciousness, it's a dham.
It's a dham.
A real guru softens and opens the heart to enliven Krishna consciousness. Appreciate the devotees as you appreciate God on the altar.
That's right.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Krishna's birth was a wombless, immaculate conception.
There you go. No womb necessary.
No womb necessary. And if Jesus shows up at your bedside, it's a holy dham.
There you go, people.
Jesus, Krishna, a hippie.
Melanie Brandy said maybe she appeared as maybe Jesus appeared Or maybe Krishna appeared, but as Jesus. So she could understand. Why are you laughing? Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Maybe
Even the
anyone appeared.
non-believers-
Maybe
Even the non-believers who tend to be on the show sometimes or host the show. But stuff is real. Magic does happen. And sometimes it happens right when you're giving birth.